Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Dojo Talks. Today, we have an esteemed guest, author and trainer, GM Jakob Aagaard. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name correctly. It's impossible. Don't even try it. The purpose of this podcast really arose when we were talking about the World Championship. We did a whole thing about the history of the World Championship, and we talked about, in particular, the 90s, where there's a dispute. And one of the things that was interesting to me on media after Gukesh won was especially a lot of the Indian media was talking about Gukesh being the 18th world champion. And what that did is it kind of just forgot all of these FIDE champions in the 90s. And Jakob is a stern defender of the champions in the 90s. So we're going to have a little podcast about that. I'm sure we're going to talk about other things as well, but we're going to have that kind of controversy out there. He wants to make a defense. Whereas to us, I think it's a little bit self-explanatory, but we're going to listen to what he says. And Jakob, I thought maybe the best way to start this off is when we started talking about the World Championship, it seemed to us, because we did a whole historical overview, that our understanding of what the World Championship is really has all these historical precedents, and it has to do with the history of the World Championship. And so I thought maybe what we could do to just start us off is, who do you think the first world champion was, and does the historical tradition matter?
So I'm gonna take them a little bit out of order here. I'm gonna start by saying I did, of course, watch your entire episode, and I did react to it. The main thing I reacted to was actually this thing about me being angry that people think differently than me, because it doesn't come from a sense of anger. I just thought, okay, I think differently, and I think it's an important topic, but it doesn't hurt me, like I thought the episode was brilliant. I absolutely recommend people to watch it. I watch a lot of you guys talking about many different things. I don't always comment on it, but I always find it very enjoyable. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. And first of all, who's the first world champion? Generally we all go with William Steinitz, and we can say that there are players before him who you could say would have been world champions if there had been sort of a kind of thing like that. Steinitz called himself the world champion after beating Andersen in a match. And you could say, if you have to be the world champion in a match, why was Andersen not the world champion then? But I think I sort of agree to a great extent with your idea of tradition. And the tradition is that's when the first world champion was. We have always followed that tradition. And then it goes quite smoothly until 1993, where we have this situation that Short beats first. Is it Karpov first and then Timman? I think is the order. To qualify for a match with Kasparov. And then when there's some problems with the prize fund and with FIDE in general, Short calls Kasparov, say, why don't we just cut FIDE out of it? Right. And you can understand it from Short's perspective. He didn't have any illusions about the match, and I thought this was a one-off for him. And this was his pension pot, rather than it was sort of a shot at the World Championship. So he wanted to maximize his income. That's how I interpret it. I know Nigel, of course, but it's one of the things you wouldn't ask about. But as a journalist, I don't feel wrong to comment on it. So it doesn't come as in his inside information. It's just how I sort of would expect it. I know that he's very proud that he drew the second half of the match. So the last 12 games were like 6-6. But then, of course, we have the Karpov-Timman match, which I'm okay with not thinking about as a world championship match, because they are both already defeated. The same, we have the Kamsky-Karpov match, which is a little bit tainted. for the same reason. And we have the Anand-Karpov match, which is also tainted. And then we get into these. We would consider them World Cups now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where my first thing comes to it. We have a situation where FIDE, the official federation of all the nations' official federation, organizes a tournament and calls it the World Championship.
Right.
And I'm sort of like, I'm not trying to win you or Jesse, but I think FIDE, we cannot have a future FIDE president or a future general secretary deciding that, no, it was not a world championship after all. So that's sort of my first point. And my second point is, and I want to preface this with, to me, Garry Kasparov is the greatest player in the history of the game. I put him marginally in front of Magnus Carlsen. Others will put it differently. And we also know that there's some people who will put Fischer far ahead of anyone, no matter what they do. But Kasparov took on the obligation of defending his title every 3 years. When he defeated Anand had won a cycle of candidates tournaments and reached the match. He was also in the other cycle, and actually the winner of that cycle, Kamsky, had defeated Anand, while Anand had defeated Kamsky in the other cycle.
Right.
So it's sort of, you could say that Kamsky is as worthy a challenger to someone as Anand was.
Right.
But okay, Karpov won the match against Kamsky, and with Karpov we get a free pass on the discussion because he was already world champion. Do we care if he was world champion at this point? Not really. Then we get into this whole counting the number of world championships we have won, which was a tradition that comes a bit later. But we have a situation where, okay, Kasparov beats Anand. It seems entirely legitimate to say that he is still world champion, and that FIDE has a losers world championship going on to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I follow the argument in that direction where FIDE has to respect Karpov as world champion at this point, I think, because that is part of what being an organization is that has hosted a world championship, and you had a winner, then he's your world champion. But I don't care personally, because he was already world champion. And we have other people like yourselves who don't consider him world champion at this point, and I don't want to try to convince you. I don't think that discussion is interesting.
But you personally, if you had to name who was world chess champion in 1996, 1997, who would you say? Somebody arrives from another planet. They say, Jakob, you're this well-respected person who can help our culture understand chess on Earth. Who was world champion in 96, 97?
I sort of was thinking, am I going to intellectualize this and so on? But no, the thought that was in my head is it's Kasparov.
Okay.
So that's my sort of instant response.
Yeah.
And I think so, yeah. Then we have the situation with the match. So Anand wins the Candidates World Cup, or what you want to call it, in Groningen. And then the next day he has to go on a plane to Switzerland. And next day again, he plays a 6-game match with Karpov. It's 3-3. Anand is totally exhausted and loses in the rapid playoff. Anand cannot be world champion because he loses. But the whole thing is it's such a stitch up. And Karpov cannot be the world champion there either.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, FIDE really lost some credibility with regards to the world championship, also among the players. But at the same time, Kasparov does not manage to organize a cycle.
Yeah.
And eventually he has a candidate match between Shirov and Kramnik because of their placing in Linares decided after the tournament, and not before the tournament, but after the tournament. So we have a situation, from my memory, I didn't check this fact, but from my memory, Kasparov also played in the tournament. So that sort of he plays in his own candidates and only decides the candidates afterwards. This is the foundation upon which you're building your narrative of your counting of world champions, I want to point out. Yeah. And of course, everyone remembers more or less, but maybe some people are young and do not know that after Shirov beat Kramnik in his match, then Kasparov offered to play a world championship match with Anand. And Anand declined it. And then he played with Kramnik and lost to Kramnik.
Right.
Now, I'm going to make an assertion here. And
Jakob, if I can interrupt you for 1 second, because you're covering a lot of ground, I just want to bolster one of your points very briefly, which is it never even occurred to me, and I lived through all this, I was watching all this, it never occurred to me that Linares was a quote-unquote candidates event. I thought Kasparov just kind of picked Shirov and Kramnik out of, his own arbitrary choice. And then, of course, when he doesn't play Shirov immediately afterwards, it means there's no cycle. Eventually, there's a match between him and Kramnik, but to me, he has no cycle between the Anand match and the Kramnik match. He's basically just picked Kramnik because that's who he felt like playing.
Yeah, so actually, at that point, around 2000, so it's fair to say that Kasparov and Anand are the two strongest players, with Kramnik just behind of the result of the period. And Shirov is also there in the mix. So we then have the situation, and we have this 1999 FIDE World Championship in Las Vegas, which is won by Khalifman against Akopian in the final.
Right.
But, most of the guys you think about are there. Adams was there. I think he was the one who eliminated Kramnik. It's not like it's, I think probably Anand didn't play, but I didn't check that, but really, like, everyone was. Short was there, and the top guys all played.
We're talking about a tournament that nowadays is a qualifier to the candidates, right? We're talking about that being World Championship.
But what we made of it later, like, do you see Linares? It doesn't even exist as being the semifinal in the candidates. I'm like. The whole thing is a mess. But there's some important points here, which is Kasparov did not fulfill his own obligation to defend his title every 3 years. The guy he eventually defends the title against has at this point never won a match. And we're going to come back to this a little bit later. It's sort of the history and the argument goes together. And okay, so we have the situation that Shirov is robbed of a match with Kasparov.
Right.
There are reasons for that. I'm not blaming Kasparov either, but it's clear that Shirov felt he was robbed, and Kasparov felt he couldn't organize a match. So there is really it's much less black and white than people like to make it, because Kasparov also did organize a match between Shirov and Polgar that Shirov played as compensation. It is not all bad. But then in 2000, the guy who rejected the match with Kasparov goes and plays the FIDE World Championship, Anand, and in the final he beats Shirov. And if you go now, you're talking about India calling 18 world champion and youngest world champion ever.
Right.
They also called Anand 5 times world champion.
They do,
and that's the first time that you can count it. And actually, we always used to. Now, Jess and I, we're sort of the same age, and the two of you are spring chickens. Yeah. But we always used to just talk about world champion and defending world champion. Like, I have no idea how many matches Karpov won. I could probably work it out in my head if I would, but but I know that Anand is 5-time world champion. Because
I've actually seen Indian chess players arguing about it in our comment section. Some saying 4, some saying 5. I've seen the argument. That's the only reason I've heard the number. I've never thought about the number either, except in that context.
Right. But yeah, of course, I will make my point in the end on that specific thing. So we have a situation where Anand has won this world championship, and Kasparov has lost to Kramnik. Now, an assertion I'm going to make continuously is qualifying for the world championship is really, really important in this connection. Because, for example, we have in 2012, we have a match between Anand and Gelfand. Gelfand had to win 10 matches to qualify, because first he won 7 in the World Cup, and then he won 3 in the candidates. This is the longest way anyone has ever taken to the World Championship. And then he lost in playoff to Anand.
And boy, was it worth those 10 matches, Jakob.
I was very disappointed. I was working with Boris at the time. This is my chance to have been the coach of a world champion. Yeah. Anyway, at the same time, there was a match between Aronian and Kramnik. And a lot of guys like Kasparov, like Topalov at the time also, but in private, sorry for quoting it, was saying that they felt the real match should be Aronian-Carlsen. But for me, chess is first and foremost a sport. And I think there, Jesse and I would probably have a little bit of a different angle from my long appreciation of your work, because you definitely have a more intellectual, philosophical approach to chess. And there's definitely a bit of, I like chess aesthetics as sport aesthetics, but for you, maybe you think of it more as art outside sport. It would be actually very interesting to hear your views on that a little bit later, maybe. Okay, so we have this situation where Anand is world champion. It's not like he beat nobody. He beat the guy who played Kasparov in a match. Shiev did. And then Shiev comes and plays the world championship and ends in the final. This apparently lottery tournament has the best player in the world beside Kasparov, who was asked if he wanted to play Kasparov and declined the match. And it has the guy who qualified to play Kasparov. And the two of them are playing a match together for the world championship. Now, arguably, this is here the counter argument, that match is not very long. If it's 4 or 6 games, I am not sure. You probably somebody could have looked it up. It's not so important because the structure of the FIDE World Championship changes 2 years later in 2002. And there we have a situation where in the one semifinal, Ponomarev wins against somebody, and in the other, Ivanchuk defeats Anand. Not a nobody to beat on your way to a final. Then they have a month, and they have, I don't know if it's 6 or 8 games between Ponomarev and Ivanchuk in the FIDE World Championship final. And of course, Ponomarev is important in this discussion because he's younger than Gukesh at the time he wins the World Championship. Now, we then have Kramnik, who didn't qualify for a match with Kasparov, playing a match with Leko, who definitely qualified all the way by playing the Bonn candidates. And that match ends 7-7 and does not have a playoff. Right. Then in 2005, after Kasparov, he exits the whole thing, retires. FIDE decides to do a tournament for the World Championship, which is what we today would call the candidates. And at this tournament, Topalov, he wins 6 of the first 7 games. The only one he does not beat in the first half is Anand, and then he draws to the end. We have had quite a few of these candidates, and 2 of them have been World Championship tournaments, and nobody has dominated as much as Topalov did at this point. We also have a tournament in Sofia where from memory, Topalov wins 2 games against Kramnik. Kramnik doesn't perform well at all, and he loses in 20 moves to Topalov with white. Like, really, at this point here, I'm absolutely aware that Kramnik is physically ill. And this should be said.
Right.
But it doesn't matter if you had a bad lunch and loses the game, you still lose the game. The circumstances of that doesn't matter. And the idea that at this point, where everyone went and played with Topalov, and Kramnik has not qualified for a match that he wins, and then he draws his next match and there's no playoff, and he is world champion and Topalov is not. For me, that does not sound right. Then we have 2006, where FIDE changes the rules. FIDE being Russian organized. The boss of FIDE works directly for Vladimir Putin in his day job, and definitely an employee. Changes the rules that allows Kramnik to challenge Topalov. It's called a reunification match. The playoff is introduced, which, by the way, is a scourge. And then, it's a huge mess. And at the end, Kramnik wins the match and becomes the unified world champion. Then we have the 2007 match tournament, where Kramnik's manager manages to negotiate that if Kramnik doesn't win the tournament, he gets to play the winner in a match. So that way, like Kasparov before, if I'm right about 99, he is playing his own candidates tournament while also playing for the world championship. And he did not, in real Trumpian way, he did not recognize Anand as world champion and said, he has only borrowed the title. It's really mine. And then he plays a match with Anand in 2008. He loses, and we are sort of back at an almost clean track because FIDE has to get Topalov in again and gives him the 2010 match, or puts him straight in the candidates. Now, so my 2 assertions are, number 1, politicians should not decide after the fact who wins a tournament. And what they are.
Yeah.
That is my 1 assertion. My second assertion is that qualifying for a world championship is at least as difficult as winning it.
Mm-hmm.
And that has varied historically.
That has varied historically.
But nowadays, I would say unequivocally true.
Well, it was true, definitely, with if we look at Carlsen. For him, qualifying was tie breaks.
Yeah.
If we look at Caruana, he's been very close 3 times. He only qualified once. Yeah. And like for me, the last 10 years, Caruana is definitely number 2 players. Rating goes up and down. Actually, the one time he won the candidates, he was seeded 5th. But, if you had thought 10 years ago, or even better, let's say 12 years ago, on the January 2013 list, where he was number 3 in the world, that and that he didn't qualify for that candidates even. He didn't play it in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't qualify for 2014. And to say that sort of from that point that he would qualify for 1 match, wouldn't win it, and not qualify again, you would say, oh, that seems very unlikely. But actually, historically, this is true. There's Korchnoi, Spassky, and Smyslov. That's about it. Qualified twice. Nepomniachtchi is the 4th one. So that's about it, yeah?
Yeah.
But many people won many matches.
Yeah.
Qualifying.
I mean, if you go way back, there's Bogolyubov, right? But that was a different era
he
of how
didn't
you got
qualify.
selected.
He
no
bought it.
qualifying.
but my point with Kramnik is, because a lot of this comes down to the debate Kramnik-Topalov.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my point with Kramnik is, this guy, he played 3 world championship matches he didn't qualify for.
So, Jakob, this is great. I feel like I didn't understand where you were coming from. We've had numerous little Twitter exchanges and stuff.
Yeah, a little bit here and there, but it's not the same. Yeah.
Because when I thought when for example we were talking about the Kramnik-Topalov thing, and you mentioned like Kramnik signed a piece of paper that said he wasn't world champion, and therefore, so I kind of took you, and I apologize because I framed what your framework was as being legalistic, but in fact, no, you're arguing from a completely different. I wouldn't, from what you've described, I wouldn't say as legalistic at all. And let me just paraphrase what you've said so far, and then you tell me if I've got it right. So yes, from your view, Kasparov is definitely still world champion through 99 when Khalif.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yes, but the real debate is, can you really have 2000 as a world championship match? But
if there's no qualification,
in no other time in history, more or less since like 1948, you have a situation where you can come to the candidates final without really having qualified your way to it, but even getting there for free and then not winning it. That how can it be a world championship match you're playing afterwards?
Yeah. Okay, now I'm just trying to be clear though, and then we could talk. So then Khalifman is a world champion in 99 then.
This is one of the things where I would say what I think doesn't matter. What you think, I would be at peace with both. Okay. With health, but the tournament he won was a very serious tournament. It's like people have tried to call it a lottery, but it really was a very serious tournament. But as a maximum, I would say we have two world champions. But there's a difference between what I think and what you think, and what FIDE as an organization who has organized that tournament thinks. This was the official world championship. Now, how do you become world champion? You win the world championships. What is a world champion? The world champion is not the number one rated player. It's not number one ranked player if you have a different calculation system. It is the winner of the world championship. If Gelfand, who by no means was the strongest player in 2012, had beaten Anand, would you consider him world champion?
But Jakob, I guess what's interesting to me about that, though, is that you aren't saying that the players that FIDE called world champions and held world championships for prior to 99, you're not calling those people world champions. They're saying Karpov was the world champion.
It's only Karpov, and he was world champion, so I have a get out of jail card there.
You're not stealing something from him.
Well, whether you're stealing from him something or not, if we ask ourselves who's world champion in 1996 or something, then FIDE is going to say it was Karpov. And by the way you're describing it, you're saying that FIDE has the power to decide how the world championship is run and who the world champion is.
I don't know if he's necessarily saying they're always right, but I think he's saying they have to be consistent. They can't run something that they call a world championship and then turn around a couple of years later and say it wasn't really the world championship.
Okay, but I'm just trying to...
Absolutely, but what Jesse is trying to say is, if FIDE organizes a world championship, then Kasparov cannot be the world champion later on. I think here I have a different view here, which is we have a conflict, we have a split into Kasparov and FIDE, and this split is mended by the match in 2006, and after that, the compromise is that, okay, we recognize everyone. And then we actually had that situation until 2022.
Is that what they agreed to on paper when they reunified? They agreed that both sides had world champions?
Well, no. Legally what happened is that Kramnik challenged Topalov, and FIDE made this extra rule. If you can put down a prize fund of $1 million, then you can challenge the world champion. So Kramnik challenges, and immediately the rule is removed, which shows that it's it's a stitch up. Again, this is someone, his own country has, the president is from his own country sponsors the match, buys him straight into the world championship. Now, if you think that's sport, then That's politics, and it's also my general problem with the rejection of Khalifman, Ponomarev, and Khashimjanov, and especially Topalov as world champions. Is again, these are guys who were living in a period where influence was judging the other cycle, political influence, and negotiations, not sport, while they actually want sporting tournaments.
Okay, just to paraphrase though, so we're saying,
yes,
for you, it's not that important who is world champion in like 96, 99, even Khalifman and Pono, you're saying, it's not that important to me. But the way
it is important to me, but it's
but where I was getting at is it's way more important for you, this question of Topalov 2005. Am I right in that?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it is true. But it is really it's not about the name. This is also often when I say, in the last year, 2 years, I've been saying, like in any other sport, Carlsen would not be the number one player. And then, people on Twitter is like, oh, Carlsen hater, blah, blah, blah. No. I actually quite like Carlsen. But, I like my sport more. And for me, it's a sport. And this is the thing. Because if it becomes this kind of popularity contest, then I'm really not into like who is getting most votes on Twitters and who is best in with the Russian government for deciding who is world champion. That for me is not a reasonable criteria. And this is sort of when you're saying tradition and so on. I'm saying no. You're saying we are putting under what is in the interest of the Russian government at 20 years ago, and what is in the interest of the best story in Indian newspapers now. This is not like tradition and consensus. This is one of the things with your previous episode where you were saying, oh, we feel that consensus is. No, it's a consensus of journalists who discovered chess 2 weeks into the match, or maybe like this is not a consensus. This is simply whatever is best.
Well, let me tell you.
Can I just say one thing on the consensus thing?
Yes.
I used to work at the Bay Area Chess Club, and on the wall of the club is a picture of every world champion. Yeah. And it starts with Steinitz, and at that point it ended with Magnus because Ding hadn't won yet. And Topalov wasn't. I don't think he was on the wall. It's just like. So I feel like this list does kind of exist, like of the matches.
No. I'm absolutely agree that, and I'm willing to absolutely. My impression is also that my view is a minority view.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm not claiming anything different, but and just to keep with the Indian theme, in the words of Gandhi, you can be in a minority of one and still be right.
Yeah. I was in a chess club in France, Kostya, and they posted all the world champions up through like 1996 on their walls, and then I think they just gave up in confusion actually. and so they didn't have a lineage where I could chime in. I've
been to a Danish chess club where they had Khalifman and Ponomarev and so on. I think where we guys have traveled to is also not a good way of deciding this.
If we visited 100 chess clubs, it would tell us something.
I think one thing about this is that it does, like Jakob's putting this interesting, it's still mildly legalistic, but there's ways in which I think you can see, at least from my perspective, listening to Jakob, that it does matter what the fans think. And just as an example, like it's kind of it's absurd to say that Karpov is a world champion in 1996. It's just like, what are we talking about?
I think I agree with you, as I said, because he was really winning the losers tournament.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like a winner's bracket and a loser's bracket.
Yes, absolutely.
And then also, like 99 to Khalifman, it's like, really? No, it's hard. And also those weren't one of the things, the reason I asked about the World Championship and the history of it is for us, it's a big deal that it's a match. And we're even upset that these matches now are so short. We want them to be longer to the death struggles. And that World Cup thing was just these mini matches, and it doesn't feel like
the
something.
finals were 6 games then. The finals became shorter when it became the World Cup. That's important to remember. And the match with Topalov Ivanchuk was a month later.
Yeah.
But let me just finish the thought I had, David. So when we go through these periods, right? And I think whether we question the legitimacy, I definitely question the legitimacy of how Kramnik arrived at that match. I'm in full agreement that was, well, I think you were giving Kasparov kind of a pass. I think that was abhorrent behavior that he did there. I think it was abhorrent when he took the match with Short too. It really ruined things. And one of the things I like to say is the GOATs all destroyed it. Fischer destroyed the World Championship to a large degree. Kasparov did, and now Magnus is blowing it. Do you hear that, Magnus? That's the company you're keeping. So the point I want to drive at here, though, is that it does get weird in the 2000s, where I think you feel strongest about it, Jakob, where we're saying, yeah, Kramnik won this great match, but he's ill. This match against Leko for the fans is disgusting. It's not a fun match to watch.
I like that match.
Oh, yeah.
He has to win the last game. It's not the only match where that ended in a tie in history and the winner kept their title. Right.
I'm just saying at this point, it's not like Kramnik is looking like a world champion, whereas Kasparov, up till 2000, it's just like the guy is the greatest player, maybe the greatest player ever lived, and here he is. And so how can you say he's not the world champion? So we get this later period, though, and then it becomes
stop you right there.
Yeah.
The world champion has to be decided not by public opinion, but by winning. Can we agree on that?
Well, I know, and he lost.
Yes.
And he lost.
He lost. Eventually, if you play long enough, you lose. And this is one of my 2-3 things with Carlsen of ranking him below Kasparov in the list is I think someone who sort of avoids that responsibility of being around until the next generation takes over can't be the greatest. It's not an act of greatness to retire while champion. I can understand that he didn't want to play, and it's not a dig at Magnus and so on. It's just the reason why one out of a few that I put him just below Kasparov as.
Like it could be a good choice for him, but a reason to rank Kasparov.
Oh, yeah, no, he doesn't, and also he doesn't care. So it's like he also ranks Kasparov higher. So it's it's not even an argument.
Okay.
Sorry, I did throw you off there, Jesse. Maybe.
No, it's okay. I was just trying to get a sense of where you were coming from, and I think, right, like this period in the early 2000s is the one that's most critical for you, as well as saying, by the way, I think of all the things that I think shocks the dojo is the idea that Kramnik Kasparov is not a world championship match. Because for us, first of all, that was a great match. That was one of the greatest matches we felt of all time. And was there shenanigans? Absolutely. I mean, we are in full agreement on that. There's no doubt about it. But was it a great match? Yeah. Was it the 1 and number 2? Maybe it was 1 and 3. Maybe. I personally feel Kramnik at 2000 before he gets sick is just absolutely amazing. And Kasparov, in a way, I feel is choosing. I mean, one of the weird things about it, of course, is it's like he's recognizing that Shirov isn't at his level and is like, no, I want to play this guy. And then he gets punished for that choice. But it's like, it was kind of the way Magnus wanted to play Firouzja for a while there, right? It was like, I want to play that guy. That's the challenge that I want to have. That's why it feels like, oh, even though there's shenanigans, it's still like there's substance to this battle that's going on here in 2000.
We also don't know for sure what Kasparov's perspective and interior was like at that point. He may have also been sort of desperate to put on some kind of a match, right? Because like he didn't manage to have a cycle. His big dreams with Intel and the PCA were, more or less collapsed, right? He wasn't able to put on a cycle. According to Jakob, he offered a match to Anand and was like the challenger declined to play the champion.
What I heard was that Anand did not like. Again, this is like general things that have been swirling around. I know Kasparov, I know Anand, I know Shirov, I know Topalov. So I'm not quoting anyone any of these people have said to me. But what I heard was he did not like the conditions of the match.
Yeah. So to some extent, Jesse, maybe he was picking the person who he knew who could beat him, or maybe he was just desperate to set up a match, and he couldn't find the money for a match with Shirov, and Anand turned him down, and he just felt like he needed to do something because, Jakob and others will say, like, if you don't organize a match for a certain period of time, then you're sort of timing out of your world championship.
That was Kasparov said it, and you can then say, okay, it doesn't really count because he said a lot of other things that all of us said things that we then later say like, no, I didn't really mean it like that. But an important thing to the point here is, and this is really the main reason I'm giving Kasparov a pass, is Kasparov did try to find organizers for a match. He did have an offer. I think the price fund was $600,000 for a match in Los Angeles, and Shirov said it's not enough and turned it down. And Kasparov, I think, gave up. And Raymond Keane came to Kasparov and said, I have a sponsor, I have an organizer, I have a venue. Do you want to play a match? But it can't be Shirov. And like, this is a very difficult choice for Kasparov, because either he doesn't have a match, and then what? Like, is he still world champion if he doesn't play Shirov? Jesse, actually, could you give us a quick answer to this? If Kasparov doesn't play Shirov, is he still world champion?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's going to have to say at some point no, right? Like,
but it's like,
for some number of years, he's not world champion anymore, right?
Well, you don't play a challenger. Are you world champion?
Well, yeah. I mean, let's just say, I always want to say, in the history of the world championship,
because then if we go to the legalistic thing, then Fischer is world champion.
Well, no, but in the history of the world championship, I just want to say there's loads of shenanigans, right?
Yes.
Lasker ducking the challenger forever, as an example, right?
Yes.
We have so many examples of shenanigans. And one of the things I like to say is the two greatest sporting events are run by corrupt organizations, FIFA and FIDE. Great. Those are great events. And they're all corrupt to the bone. But the fans ultimately are going
to... giving IOC a pass there.
Yeah.
The fans are ultimately the ones who decide, and that's why, to me, like the fans are looking at Kasparov, Kramnik, and I was like, yeah, for sure, that's the world championship. But
this is why I'm saying we have actually properly organized open sporting event with fair qualification parameters, and big prize funds, organized by the official organization, and then you have, I don't know, a drive-by-night match kind of organized between a guy who says he's past the term of being world champion and a guy who is definitely the only player who doesn't have a right to play that match because he's the only one who's disqualified by sports. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, we come back to this thing where you're talking about the public and the attention and answers and so on. And I'm saying, no, chess is a sport. It's not decided by popular opinion. It's not decided by politics. It's decided by winning or losing. And it has to be reasonably fair. And this is why, if we go forward to Ponomarev, the only two guys who are not in that is Kasparov and Kramnik. Everyone else is in that. And then we go to Khashimjanov. Anand didn't want to go to Libya. So he is not in that tournament. But Khashimjanov does eliminate Topalov, who, if you look at his streak, winning 9.5 out of 10 games, on the way to that semifinal was fantastic. Then we have the 2005, where we know Kramnik is not won against Leko. The match against Kasparov is impressive, but it's also tainted. And we have Topalov against all the best players in the world, except for Kramnik, wins the tournament very, very convincingly, and plays Kramnik and crushes him. And the one side of the ledger is sports all the way, and the other side of the ledger is your shenanigans. So I want to come to my end point here, because you sort of have preempted it a number of times. But my end point is they're all world champions.
So wait a second.
And it sort of ruins the numbering of them.
Yeah,
that's the thing of numbering them is it requires you to throw someone out at some point, or you're going to have co-world champions, which is another discussion, of course.
So when we visit the Killer Chess Training Room, the dojo there in the Killer Chess Training, we're going to see a list of world champions up on that wall, and like Kasparov and Karpov are going to be there at the same time, and then Khalifman and Kasparov and Kramnik and Pono and all these people are going to be like co-world champions for that time.
The great thing is you can sort of do a trick and just put the year where they first won it. So
yeah.
if you want to have a list, you put in the year where they first won it.
Okay.
So Jesse,
I'm saying if you want Kramnik in the list, you have to at least take Topalov, because Kramnik, it's just all nonsense. It's all politics, negotiations, buying your way in, and really so much.
Okay, but
it's really, if you want tainted, it's everything that
the reason that
these matches was tainted.
But the reason the dojo has a problem with that is that it wasn't a match.
All right. Well, hang on, Jesse. So I think you've tried to guess Jakob's framework incorrectly a couple times.
Okay.
I'm going to take a stab at guessing.
All right.
Jakob, is the World Championship automatically owned by FIDE or owned by the current world champion or anybody, or is the World Championship just the best organized competition that you have in a given 1 or 2 year period?
So first of all, I just want to say a thing there because I totally understand Jess's logic, and I totally buy it. And at the same time, I also totally, I have my own logic, and I think it's equally valid, and that's why I'm saying they're all world champions, because the dishonest thing is to continue, because it's clearly that FIDE owns the world championship and organizes the world championship, and the players that we're talking about all signed contracts with FIDE for the world championship. The idea that we have FIDE sort of throwing their world champions out, or later by politics or by personal preference of I think one specific FIDE official. I think this is by all means clearly the worst way to decide who was world champions or not. But your point is, David, is of course incredibly intelligent as always. I think that if we had a situation where Kasparov had run good cycles, had played the challenger, had lost to a challenger, the challenger had run good cycles and had played, and so on, and we had these two parallel systems where the one was 2-game matches indefinitely, and the other one was candidates tournament, and then a challenger playing the world championship in a match, I think I would have a very bad case. No matter how well organized the World Cup World Championship would be. And FIDE, you of course recognized this in late 2004 or early 2005. And for this reason, they didn't have a match. They could not do a match. They needed a world champion. And here we come to another thing, which is in 1948, Jesse, who is the world champion?
We have a real problem with 1948.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
No, we don't.
I do.
Well,
I do. I do.
You do.
Okay, excuse me. Excuse me. I do.
I think
really...
Kostya and I know who was world champion in 1948. We could answer, Jakob.
Yeah. I just said
I really want to say, maybe I guess here I'm minority. I don't believe that a tournament decides who the world champion is. And that's why, for me, the historical backdrop of it being a match is so important. It's just vital to what I think a world champion
How do you feel with a tournament deciding who's the challenger?
I don't like it. I think the candidate cycle that we had when we were kids, Jakob, was great. It was also very entertaining.
It was bad. I can tell you why it's bad.
Okay.
Because it was propped up on a lie. Most of the matches were played in the Soviet Union for fictitious prize funds. And then the players got nothing. So if you think that is good, I disagree. I think it was great chess.
One of the things I didn't understand as a fan until much later, by the way, was that the reason that the matches were instituted was that so that the Soviet players couldn't collude at the qualifying tournaments.
Against Soviet players, remember, we're talking about Kurkao, 1962, where the Soviet players were Petrosian, Geller, and Keres, who agreed in this 4-round all-play-all tournament to draw all games with each other.
Right.
While also Soviet players, Tal and Korchnoi, really, like Fischer, got very exhausted. Tal ended actually in the hospital in that tournament. So Soviet players, yes, Fischer liked to talk about the red were cheating, and surely there was not a socialist bone in Korchnoi's body, but no, also Tal and Korchnoi were victims of this. So no, three players cheated, and he didn't want to play it again unless they stopped cheating, and then they made matches, and then he didn't play anyway for a while.
Yeah.
So, chess history is great.
Okay, so can I say a couple of things here that I just feel like are important? Because I thought David was getting a good point, and I totally respect Jakob's position, and in general, I have a great respect for his views on chess. But for me, it's like it's always been very clear. It's like there's a lineage, and I do think FIDE owns the world championship, but only so far as they service it properly, right? I think we'd all agree that if they scuff the cycle, like in the 90s, we're not even arguing about the 90s, right? Because we just agree, like, totally scuffed cycle, we just don't count those players, like, or we don't really care about them.
Well, scuffed cycle, they ran a real cycle. It's just that Kasparov left them. I mean,
there's other things
interzonal and candidates matches.
having to play Karpov, like, very, very quickly after qualify. Like, there's many things like that.
Right, but
That
like
was bad.
93
It was
and
very
96.
bad.
But like 93 and 96, they ran real cycles. If FIDE owns the title, full stop, then in 93 and 96, Karpov is world champion.
95. 93,
Sorry.
95.
93
Yeah,
and 95.
but that's what I'm saying. And then it's like, we're not really arguing about Karpov in 93, 95. It's just like, and I think just to give another example, like if FIDE decided the next world championship is just going to be 2 Russian players, like we probably wouldn't respect that, even if they call it a world championship.
Right.
So
but my
there is
quibble,
some
Kostya,
level of like good faith effort they have to put in to making it a worthy cycle.
Right. Yeah. But my quibble, Kostya, is I feel like in 93 and 95, it's not fair to say they scuffed it. It's just that Kasparov did a cycle that was even better. And basically the only thing that made it better was that he was in it. Otherwise, it was, all the same people.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
format.
What you said about competing cycles is important, because I was also thinking, imagine if Fischer in 75, he gives up the title. Imagine if Karpov says, hey, you know what? I'll play Fischer under your conditions. Let's go find a sponsor. They go play a match outside of FIDE. We would consider the winner of that match the world champion, right? Even though FIDE didn't organize the match. So it's really just
FIDE could
whether there's
organize like a
competing...
Korchnoi-Tal match in 1974 or 1975, and we would say the winner of Fischer versus Karpov was the world champion.
Yeah, so there is a thing, but
do you honestly think that FIDE's cycle in 2000 was worse than Kasparov's?
No, but in 93 and 96...
No, I'm asking Kostya. You're placing yourself well in the middle, so
their cycle, is worse. That's definitely a very fair question, and I don't really think about it. For me, it's
as a sporting event. Where
definitely,
you have the winner is eliminated and the loser continues.
Why, for me, the focus is not on the cycle. I put the focus on the match. So for me, I'm comparing Kasparov-Kramnik, which to me was a great like world championship match. I think Kramnik was like a very deserving winner. For me, I actually feel like Kramnik won 3 world championship matches. That's how I see his history. I would agree that he didn't qualify for them, but for 2 of them already, in my mind, he was the world champion, right? So it's like he didn't need to qualify for the second 2. He qualified by beating Kasparov. That was his qualification. Yeah, so I feel like that match for me is definitely much more legitimate than the World Cup, because I do believe in matches and the lineage, and then the fact you have to beat the previous guy to get the title. You know, I just really believe in that tradition.
If Caruana beats Gukas in a match, now would he be world champion?
He means with no qualification, by the way, Kostya.
Just
they play a match.
You know, Rex Singfield. We know he's got the money. He says, "Oh, 5 million, come play in St. Louis. We have a match."
Well, yeah.
Says sure.
Well, hold on. If they call it a world championship match, and Gukesh agrees to play.
If you call it a world championship, see, this is my whole point.
Well, Jakob, but let's do a more interesting hypothetical. Let's say Carlsen gets Rex and says, "Let's get me a match with Gukesh," and they play a long match, a real match, and call it a world champion. Yeah, I think we're going to call that a world championship. Now, is it wrong? Is there a bunch of problems with that? Is it unfair? Is it unsporting? Yes, but
and that's
the
why
fans are going to look.
Championship match, Jesse.
The fans saw that match.
Unsporting.
Magnus, listen to me, buddy. Organize that match, buddy. Come on now.
I guess the reason I agree with Jesse on this one is because before 1948, we had a lot of these world championship matches where we had like Lasker ducking players, we have like Alekhine pulling shenanigans, right? So pre-1948, it was kind of a wild, wild west. And we respect all those world champions. No one's questioning Lasker, Alekhine, like all these guys. We don't question the matches that they played, even though like Lasker played a bunch of people outside their peak or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. For me, that's the beauty of the cycle, the lineage, is that it has been scuffed throughout history. Like a lot of cycles have had issues. But ultimately there's a match and then the winner gets decided in the match. Thankfully, we haven't had a case where like a match is truly disputed as far as I know. Like there's at least a winner to every match and there's some, you guys don't think Kramnik beat Lyko? I think according to the rules of the match, he did.
I think, according to the rules, he won.
To me, neither of them won that match. They drew it, and there was no world champion that year.
Yeah, so I just value these matches very highly. I almost think of it as like boxing. It's like someone holds the title. If they're willing to step into the ring with someone else and they lose in fair fight that both parties agree to, they lose the title. I think that's very fair.
But that just sets up a scenario where more or less anyone can call the world championship, and if you have enough money and attention, it is a world championship.
Well, I don't know. Like in the hypothetical that I thought was kind of interesting that you brought up, Jakob, if Fabi played a match with Gukesh, no one's going to call that a world championship. But if Magnus did, but think about it. If Magnus did, the fans would be like, "All right, here we go. Finally, Magnus is coming to his senses, ready to play a real challenger. Let's go. Let's see what happens."
They would have a better sporting argument because Carlsen was never beaten, and that's really where the whole thing collapses for me, because there's no way that you can play a semifinal and lose, and then play the final, and it's a proper world championship. Mm-hmm. And then everything after that, every match that Kramnik gets after that builds on this. So then he draws with Leko and he draws with Topalov, because if you have to accept tradition and lineage and so on. Then afterwards, they just had a rapid match for entertainment, and Kramnik won that. And who cares? Because
But the rapid match was part of
his title by drawing his match.
Yeah,
Right?
but yeah, it's true. So you said that
you can argue anything here. You really
said that
can,
his
and all of it makes
qualification-
sense.
You said that Kramnik's qualification, right, is winning the match with Kasparov, but like Jakob's point is like not only did he not qualify, he was disqualified, right?
He's the only one who's disqualified.
He's literally disqualified.
And I just want
disqualified from the match with Kasparov, but he did win the match against Kasparov.
Right, but he's disqualified by losing to Shirov, so he can't compete in that year's World Championship cycle anymore.
If you want to argue any kind of fairness, then Shirov either is world champion or fair, whoever actually plays Shirov, which is Anand, who absolutely qualifies for that, as does Shirov for that match. And Anand was the first pick of Kasparov. You know, like Kasparov in this narrative is losing the losers bracket.
Look, all right, I totally agree with you guys that Shirov he gets the sorest end of the stick by far, right?
Sure.
Like, absolutely. But unfortunately, he's not the only player in history who got the sore end. Like, there are other challengers in history that were ducked. They didn't get the match they were supposed to get. Like, they were clear number 2 or whatever. And look, we don't.
But you see, the crux of Jakob's argument is about Kramnik, not Shirov.
He lost.
Right? The crux of his argument is like you can't be in a tournament, get eliminated, and then later be declared the winner of the tournament.
Well, let me ask you this, Jakob. Let's say that Kasparov had won in 2000.
Yes.
Then is Seleifman the champion?
Well, we have a real problem because the challenger is Shirov, and Shirov lost to Anand, and Kasparov refused to play him, because you get back to this Fischer-Karpov situation also, where Karpov is politically decided as a world champion. Fischer did not reject to play Karpov. Fischer rejected to play under the organized terms, which is not different from 1993. Fischer wanted to play best until 10 games, and at the score 9-9, the champion retains the title.
So he's obliging Karpov to win at least 10-8 to win the match. He has to win by a full 2 points. Is the only way to win, right?
We have a Lasker-Schlechter match, which is very much debated. What is actually the requirement for that one? And you have done that in previous videos, I know.
Yeah.
But you know, the thing is, you cannot say, oh, but Karpov afterwards won a lot of tournaments, which is going to be the argument for why Karpov is the world champion.
I mean,
because then suddenly
he did do that as an attempt at the argument.
In Yugoslavia is a part of becoming world champion after the fact. You know, like because your whole then you have a problem with Karpov being world champion, because if you want to go lineage, then you know FIDE didn't organize a match for Karpov. Oh, it's just bad for Karpov because we don't respect FIDE as the holder of the title. It is the lineage. Then Fischer, he defeats Spassky. So who is the world champion in 2000 in this logic, Costa?
Well, look, the thing is, Fischer didn't attempt to do his own world championship, right? So of course he can't just take the title and seclude himself with it, right?
The lineage does have some
his own championship, and then did someone else's, which is Raymond Keen's.
Well, Kasparov did a different world championship, right? And that's why I do consider Kasparov world champion from 85 to 2000. Because he was putting a good faith effort into finding challengers, finding, money, playing the matches, playing fair matches. So
I agree with you along the way, especially on the good faith effort part. Absolutely. And it's nobody's life is sort of an even keel. I'm sure that that period of Kasparov's life must have been quite tumultuous. I think the idea of sort of like he cheated Shirov, I don't like it, because clearly he if we go back to the lineage again before 1948, it was always the challenger's job to raise funds, while Shirov is sitting saying not enough, and that's it.
And Kasparov's trying to raise the money
And
because
Kasparov is trying to raise the money and failed, and then eventually just gave up because he was just spending his time trying to get money for Shirov, and Shirov says not enough.
He's chosen to put himself in that position of being the world champion and the organizer of the cycle, but it is a tough position.
And like everything is a mess all the way, which is why my proposed compromise is saying the sporting events organized by FIDE, like from 1999, they are very strong, they're fair, they're well organized, and they are called the World Championship. So therefore, my solution is you put in the world champion, and then you put in the year where they first won the World Championship. And it's not a perfect solution. And the idea that somehow Topalov's achievement in winning in San Luis, Argentina, in 2005 is not World Championship worthy, but Kramnik, after not qualifying to play Kasparov, then drawing Leko, is World Championship. It's just not clear cut, and you can argue both cases, and it's sort of like a debate team topic. It's fantastic because you can stand there and really riff on both point of view. I have a lot of respect for your point of view. I think you have long videos about it, and it's very common. My point of view, I was very happy to be invited here to present it, and my peace and love solution is actually like they are all world champions. But if they're all world champions, and this is of course the killer point, the youngest world champion was Ponomarev, and he won in a match. It might not be as long as Jesse wanted, but he won in a match.
Yeah, and it wasn't that short either.
I'm not sure it was 6 or 8 games. I know you've been Googling while we've been talking. So
I looked this up just to have the details, because when you first asked about the Anand Shirov match, was it 4 games or 6? I was like, let me pull up the results of all these FIDE things. So those FIDE knockouts, they started instituting that the semifinals were 4-game matches instead of 2-game matches. And then the final was a 6-game match, right? So Anand and Shirov only played 4 games, but that's because Anand scored 3.5 in the first 4 games. So they stopped after 4 games. And actually, the Ponomarev match with Ivanchuk was the one year that they did an 8-game match instead of a 6-game match for the finals. The difference between those 8 games and like the Caruana-Carlsen 12 games, it's not that much, especially when you consider that these 12-game matches are truncated from matches that used to be 30, 40 games long. But I want to propose the following argument. Jakob, you asked us earlier, like, at what point would Kasparov no longer have been world champion if he didn't have a match, if he didn't have a cycle, right? And I think that's getting at a question of expiration date. Is there an expiration date on the lineage, right? And then this comes up again with the point about Fischer, right? Is there an expiration date if you don't play? And I think that there is. I think there's an expiration date on the lineage. For anyone who believes in the lineage, you still have to believe there's some expiration date. There's some way that a sitting champion can essentially abdicate their championship without being beaten. So for me, if Kasparov said 3-year cycles, I'm giving him like a wiggle room of about 1.5 years, a gray area. Like he's got maybe 4 to 4.5 years tops, and then his world championship title has kind of expired. That's my take. Everyone can put their own thing, but there's got to be some point where you say, okay, Fischer's no longer world champion. He hasn't shown up for anything. He hasn't organized anything alternative, etc. The same would go for Kasparov. But likewise, if you take the FIDE owns the world title approach, I think you also have to have a thing that's sort of within reason, within a possibility of it expiring. They have to propose a cycle that's good enough and that happens regularly enough, or they can lose it as well. So, for example, Jesse, you were also maybe going to ask about freestyle chess and whether or not Magnus can go off and do a Fischer Random Championship elsewhere. And we've got FIDE that didn't run their Fischer Random Championships in 2024, right? At some point, if they're not hosting an event, does that make it possible for other people to host the event? Or if they say, our classical world championship will be a 2-game match followed by a 20-game blitz match tiebreaker in the event of a very likely 1-1 tie. There's something they can do to lose their ownership, even if you believe in ownership, right?
So we have in the world history, we have exactly 2 world champions who organized their own cycle, Kasparov and Kramnik. They organized one, and then they failed to organize another one.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying here, your argument, the argument of Lineage, is that Fischer is no longer a world champion because he wasn't good at organizing world champions.
Well, not just that, but also
He could have found someone else to organize it. He needed to participate in some venue.
Fischer also stopped playing, right?
There was negotiations through to 77 of a match between Fischer and Karpov within FIDE, and eventually it didn't happen. And Karpov somewhere described it, at some point I realized that the greatest thing to ever happen in my life wouldn't happen after all. And that match then became the 1978 Karpov-Korchnoi match. They did try for a very long time to find common ground with Fischer. But I think at this point they had the view that Karpov was the world champion and sort of Fischer should be challenger, even though that they wouldn't be, like in 2006, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage, but he wouldn't have draw odds, was eventually made it collapse. But the idea that because Fischer didn't manage to organize a cycle, he's less of his claim to be continuous world champion is less than Kasparov or Kramnik, and he can therefore be replaced.
Fischer stopped playing though. Kasparov kept playing, and he kept his #1 status. I mean, it's very clear he was.
But again, you're into then winning Linares makes you world champion. Then what is the world championship?
No, but the point is, Jakob, if the Lineage people want to say you own the title because you're the world champion, there's still an expiration date on it. You have to do something with it. Like the previous world champions, they didn't necessarily have to be great tournament organizers, but Lasker would play world championship matches. Even Lasker would sometimes play world championship matches, right?
I think anything before 1948 is sort of irrelevant because FIDE is not a part of the discussion.
Okay. But to Jesse, it's not, because he believes it's still Lineage, FIDE or not FIDE, right? My point is, like, Fischer doesn't have to be a great tournament organizer, but if he wants to be world champion, he has to compete in a world championship at some point, right? And if he doesn't want to do it with FIDE,
it was taken away from him politically.
No, but if he wanted to still have the world championship, then he needed to put it on the line somewhere, somehow, with or without FIDE.
The guy was willing to play. Nobody challenged him. Well, Karpov did. FIDE did. But the thing is...
then he wasn't willing to play.
But then you're sort of inventing rules after the fact to make it fit into the lineage. Everything is, we like this lineage, and then we make the rules to fit. While my argument is the opposite, which is it has to be proper sporting competitions.
Yeah, and that's actually what I agree with, Jakob.
Collapses because Kramnik is the thing that just isn't proper sports.
And that's actually what I agree with, Jakob. I don't necessarily believe in the lineage. I think the lineage is one element of what creates legitimate world championships, but that it has an expiration and a limit on it. So if the person with the lineage doesn't want to continue the lineage, then they give it up.
And a
proper sporting match, the best one that there is the next answer.
And the thing about that, where I think I want to talk about expiration, is I have minority opinion in the dojo, is that I have a real problem thinking about Nepo Ding as being a world championship because Carlsen isn't there. So it's a problem for me when clearly the best player isn't playing in the match. It's a problem as a fan to call something a world championship when it's clearly two chumps. It doesn't matter.
A bit hard, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, compared to Carlsen, I think it's fair to say. And then, with this latest one, I feel a lot better about it, but it's still like let's call it a faded asterisk. And I like David's thing. That's like at a certain point, the best player has to participate, has to be in it. But as long as like it's someone is clearly the best player, and you're having whatever cycle it is, no matter how cool it is or sporting, if the best player isn't there, That's a major problem. It's a
It's a
major
major problem,
problem.
but you can't force the best player to turn up.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
So it's
Magnus,
whatever
you
the
blew
best
it.
event is. It's whatever the best
It's
event
actually
is.
worse than that, David, because we have a situation here where, you know, one thing I want to say about Carlsen is the guy doesn't lie. The only time I'm not sure if, you know, when something comes from Carlsen where I feel that something is maybe not entirely accurate is when we have the long tweets, which were probably written by lawyers. You know, we had two in the last year, one after the World Championship. We had one with something else.
With the Niemann, yeah, that was the Niemann tweet.
But if you listen to him in his interview, like if there's something around the situation that he has forgotten to say, which is relevant, he will bring it up. The whole James thing. He was not sitting there being press savvy and saying, "Oh, you know, like it's insulting and blah blah blah." He said, "No, it's really about something else." Nobody sort of have to read it in because he says it's really about something else.
Right.
So with Carlsen, I say this because Carlsen says, "I don't enjoy these matches. I don't want to play them anymore.
Yeah.
I'm letting it go." So there is no reason to not believe him when he says that. However, it is also clear that the whole business empire built around Carlsen has been pushing very hard for his number one status. He doesn't defend his rating because he doesn't really play much.
Right.
He doesn't defend his world championship. And then we have a lot of push for the fact it's not a real world championship because this guy who's highest rated but doesn't play, so you can't take the rating away from him. You have to simply jump over him, even though his rating is really from 2021. Yes, he's defending it, but defending and gaining is two very different things, as we all know. You cannot win the world championship because he doesn't play. It's very good for his business interest. It's very good for the freestyle thing here, but it's also a load of crock. Is basically what it is. But the other thing is, again, we should move on for this topic here because we've all laid out our case, I think, fairly openly and in a very friendly way. I hope. I'm very excited about it. But
I've been loving this. I learned a lot.
But you know, my sort of conclusion is that Jesse is the artistic, romantic view, where it doesn't matter if the guy is not willing to play. It can't be real because, you know, it's like it loses the aura, it loses the magic. While I'm like, this is a sporting competition. If you show up and you win, then you're the world champion. And this is two sometimes often very compatible views. When Carlsen is world champion, that period, you know, Jesse and I are standing hand in hand and enjoying it. And then Carlsen is no longer there, and Jesse is sort of in pain. And I'm like, well, it's a sports tournament. He didn't play. He can't win. You know, he didn't want to win, and it's fine. And good luck to him. I'm hoping he's living his best life, and he's an amazing player. I enjoy seeing him play. And like can't get a negative word out about me. He's just not world champion because he didn't play.
And let me just say, I love being thought of as artistic. but
you are.
But the reason
artistic, not
right. I know what you're saying.
Artistic.
But for me, the informing moment about it is the idea that before Steinitz really proclaims this world championship idea, is that everyone in Europe at that point is like, well, we can't even talk of ourselves as world champion because Morphy's not dead yet. And Morphy's clearly the best player. So it's not just like an artistic thing in my head about the best player in the world. I feel like this whole idea of the world championship is a historically created, beautiful thing that goes back and has all these resonances with the past. So when I have an asterisk with Ding Nepo, it has a lot to do with Morphy and what people were thinking about what the world champion, best player in the world meant, you know? So anyways, I just wanted to throw it out there because I don't think of myself as like an artistic person in that way, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I respect tradition. I think things can also change over time and often have to, right? So we can keep some things and have some things informed and have some lineage, but we can also reshape things in new ways over time. And
yeah, of course.
So let me ask something. Let me ask if, like, let's say FIDE said, all right, we can't do these long matches anymore. We have to adjust to the modern public. We want to do like one world championship per year. They do like a new cycle every year. Every year there's a new world champion. And then it's a bit random. Maybe they even shorten the time control, right? It's like not even long. It's like 45-minute games. And so then we start getting a bunch of world champions, like Caruana 1 year, then next year Arjun, next year Noterbeck. And it's just like boom, 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 boom. To me, it would just feel a bit sad. Like we have this huge long lineage of champions, like who are world champions for years and years. And then all of a sudden it's just like a bunch of dudes who just like they had one good year and then it would still be FIDE owning the cycle, but it's like, would we really like, would we respect that? You know, for me, the lineage just breaks if they do something like that.
Exactly.
Things can get better. They can also get worse, you know, and they can come back around.
I agree entirely. For example, I thought the worst candidates tournament, okay, with the exception of the lack of candidates tournaments, the worst candidate tournament in the way it was organized, not through the fault of anyone, but the way it turned out, was the 2011 tournament in Kazan, where, you know, we really saw a lot of it being decided in blitz, a lot of short draws. There was
no Carlsen.
It was really a mess. No Carlsen, but, you know, he didn't show up, so that was his choice. Because he predicted it would be a bad tournament, which it really was. But, you know, this is also the peak of my career as a coach. So it's, but, you know, I'm being honest about the fact that you know, this was not a good system. It didn't have the right winner. They correctly, Carlsen called it right, and they correctly abandoned it afterwards. I'm still very happy about the result. but yeah, no, but I agree with Kostya. Yeah, it would be worse. But let's say Kostya, they did it, and in 2 years, Caruana won it. Are you gonna, you know, on a date later in life, are you gonna tell really someone that you're not gonna tell them you beat the world champion?
No, I mean, I'd say
come on, you are.
No, I was gonna say, like, I tell people I beat one of the greatest players of all time. I feel like it's even a better.
No. Put on the line. You're gonna say, you know, I beat world champion. It was before he was world champion. He was still number 2 in the world. You know?
Yeah, but no. I think, to be honest, I kind of support that. Actually, I floated this idea on the podcast. Jesse and David got very mad at me. I feel like the lineage is great, but it should be retired. Like, it doesn't really fit the modern world anymore, and we're seeing the issues of it. And it's like, we still don't agree. So I feel like if they just retired the lineage and just said Carlsen, this is when I originally made the point. If they was like, Carlsen is the last classical quote unquote world champion, from now on we're gonna have a modern system, new world champion every year, then I would respect that. I'd be like, all right, new world champion, modern system, Carlsen's the last of the lineage. I have no issue with that. But we're kind of like, if we start throwing in like, yeah, all these random players like that won the FIDE World Cups, they're equal to guys like Kasparov, Karpov, Tal, Botvinnik. To me, I don't know, it doesn't feel right.
One thing,
it may not be equal, but you know, it's a new era, and they face a new level of competition too.
You see the Djokovic model?
Sorry?
Did you see the Djokovic graphic?
Oh, no.
So basically, he had a graphic with the world champions, and it included a corner of it, which was the FIDE World Champions.
Right.
So my sort of only objection to that is Topalov did not win a tournament like the World Cup. He won a tournament like the one Botvinnik won in 1948.
Yeah,
and that is why he is a different case. And also, Ponomarev did win an 8-game match, which was not at the end of a World Cup. It was a month later. You could maybe say it should be 6 months later or whatever. And you know, I don't disagree on anything in terms of what is the highest quality competition. Like, I think we are all in perfect alignment. But this is my strongest view. If you are an organization which everyone agrees that their tournament now is the World Championship, and they have previously held World Championships, then that organization cannot, either by vote or by internal bureaucratic operations, as is what happened, suddenly remove people from having won the World Championship. You cannot do it by bureaucracy or politics. Then you know your whole argument of being pure really disintegrates.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree there. FIDE should stand by their boys, and I do like
disagree.
those, like the two lists.
I disagree in theory. I don't necessarily disagree in this example, but I think that there are limits to everything. If you push it to an extreme, you could find a case where an organization should go back and say, oh, excuse us, we made a mistake. This thing was not really a world championship, even though we called it one then. So if some really crazy guy were in charge of FIDE and they ran a world chess championship where the players didn't even play chess, they just got up on stage and played rock, paper, scissors or something like that for 20 minutes, and then they declared somebody the world chess champion, and then a new FIDE president and administration were swept in a year or two later off of a public outcry against this ridiculous display. And, you know, Jakob came in as a new FIDE president with a mandate to put chess back into FIDE. He could say that somebody nobody's ever heard of named, you know, Janine Rousseau, who was good at rock, paper, scissors, was not FIDE world chess champion last year.
Well, you know how both a semifinal and a final in the candidates have been decided, right?
There was a coin flip once.
There was also the casino
roulette wheel twice, 1983 and 1990.
It's always been scuffed.
So we have the Hübner Smyslov match was 7-7. It was decided by, it might have been a coin flip. I thought it was roulette wheel.
I thought it was roulette, yeah.
And there was a Polgar against, sorry, I can't remember who won the roulette wheel there, but Polgar, she lost out of getting a match in 96 or something like that. Susan Polgar. And then had to, you know, qualify again later to get the match and become world champion.
Okay.
So they drew a match in Monaco, and it was decided on roulette wheel, and she lost.
Yeah, but at least they played some chess. Imagine if that's all they did. Rock, paper,
scissors require much more skill. Did you want to talk about something else?
Let's go Carlsen, yeah?
Okay, and actually to talk about Carlsen, because I think is kind of important, is that I think, like, we're talking about this as kind of people who've been around the chess world, you know, deciding what we think about who the world champion is. But I think one of the things that's really interesting about the lineage and the idea of the world champion is that a lot of it there's a lot of weight to it that I think comes from outside the chess world. Like the outside of the chess world, they want to see someone that they recognize as a genius, somebody who's amazing, somebody who is stellar, who represents the height of intellectual ability. And that projection is what drives the hype of the match. And I think is one of the key reasons why the World Championship match is always so hyped up and amazing. And it actually, I think, Jakob, you'd agree with me that they actually continue to be more and more hyped and more pumped, more and more numbers because of the internet. And we've seen, like, the last couple cycles, even if me and David don't think they're the greatest matches ever in terms of interest, it's just been explosive, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with that projection of the outside of the world, outside the chess world, onto us of what they want to see that drives this idea of the world championship. And that's why, even for me, the lineage is so important, because you got to have, like, oh, who is the best, you know, who is the best? And here we go. Anyways, that's a short way to say Carlsen probably still the best. I'm beginning to doubt it, though, because he's not training that much right now. I don't feel like he's working on his game. As a trainer, I don't think, as a player as well, I don't think you can continue to play well if you do not play yourself, if you do not actively play and go over your games. I don't think it's going to happen. I think these Indian kids are ready to crush him. So I think he's at the end. And I'm pretty sure, and that he would not be number one much longer, especially if we had Jakob's way of doing the rating system where recency, the recent results are weighted higher.
Yeah, I can argue for my talking about system. I don't have a point system where I can draw out a world ranking list for you. The best version of that would be something akin to the circuit system, but I have some problems with it, which I'll explain. So I'll explain my premise first, which is that chess is a sport. This is my starting point. Chess is a sport. Mm-hmm. What is the important thing in sport? That is to win events, win tournaments, not win individual games. So we have at the moment a world ranking system which comes from a time where everyone was more or less always playing until Fischer suddenly didn't play anymore. And we have all these debate of, what then? What does it mean? And all of the things become almost a religious discussion.
Right.
But generally we had a situation until Kasparov retired and said, I'm out, which was very easy to deal with, which is then after 12 months, he disappeared from the list and nobody really counted him in any way. But now we have a situation with a player who's out but still playing.
Right.
Because to give you some of the statistics, in 2024, Carlsen, he played 18 games.
Right.
He sort of held his rating, plus minus 1 or 2 points, something like that. And we have a rating system that is designed exclusively to predict the result of the next game and ranks every game equal. Now, in those 18 games, which I think he played a league game someplace maybe, but he played the Norway chess tournament,
right,
where he scored 3 wins and 1 loss. He lost to a young Indian, Pragnananda. And then he played in the Olympiad, where he got a bronze medal, and he made, I think, the 4th best score overall. Somebody can fact check me. He had a very similar tournament to Erigaisi, and I think his performance was a little bit lower. But his opponents were very similar, but it was not the same opponent because Erigaisi was on board 3 for India and Carlsen was board 1 for Norway. Number 1 and 2 in the performance was Gukesh and Abdusatorov in this Olympiad. So Carlsen has played these 18 games. Yeah. And in these 18 games, I think he beat 4 players over 2,700. And in the same time, Caruana has played 87 games, which is much more, and has a performance rating, in my calculation, 2798. You can calculate it in a few different ways, but 2798. And he has beaten 5 players over 2,700. And we have Erigaisi, who has played 113 games,
right,
made 87.5 points, more points than Caruana has made games, played very different opponents, and has beaten 6 players over 2,700.
Oh.
And then you have Gukesh, who has played far less games. I didn't count his number of games. I was only counting how many over 2,700 he had beaten, and it was 13. If you take the big events in 2024, it would be Vagancy, it would be the candidates, it would be Superbet in Romania, it would be the Olympiad, it would be Singfield Cup, and it would be the World Championship.
At which nobody won a single game, basically.
Yeah, more or less. Gukesh certainly didn't. He made 9 draws.
9 draws.
And actually got no circuit points because you have to make a plus score. That's why he's only like number 5 in the circuit. So these are the biggest tournaments in the year. In Vike, Gukesh, he loses the last blitz game and does not win the tournament.
Yeah, but he tied for first in the class.
Tied for first. So because I hope Jess and we can find common ground on absolute respect and love for rapid and blitz, but it's just a different game than classical chess.
Right.
So he ties for first in Vike. Actually, the funny thing in the circuit is sometimes people tie and share the points, and sometimes there's some blitz game, and then they get wildly different circuit points, and that decides who qualifies for the candidates this year, actually. So we have he shares in Vike, he wins the candidates, he shares in Superbet in Romania, +1. Caruana loses the last round game. Then he clearly wins the Olympiad in every which way possible. He makes one of the highest performance scores of all time. Carlsen is there, is far behind in performance score. He beats Caruana. There's like nothing. His team wins, he wins gold. Then he goes on to make, this 50% in Singfield Cup and wins the World Championship. Like any other point system for world ranking, he's number one. It doesn't matter how you design it, unless you have something which is counting games played in 2021, same value as 2024. You cannot make a system that make Carlsen number one.
Now, Carlsen's performance rating in 2024 over those very small number of games. I mean, so small that you really have to, the sample size is a real problem, right? But his performance rating was 28.31, exactly the same as the rating he ended the year with. So he was like exactly at his performance level.
I am not at all disagreeing. And also, as we saw with the number of 2,700 players he defeated, like he is in very few games, you can see that there still is a huge margin between him and Caruana and Erigaisi.
Yeah,
I'm not discussing at all that Carlsen is best.
Right.
This is not my argument.
Right.
My argument is he number one? No, because, and it's like with the World Championship with Fischer, you have to be available to beat. You have to go out and prove it. It's sport. Yes, he's the favorite. He's the best, but he's not number one if he doesn't play.
Right.
And I think that's a very simple sporting principle. If you don't participate, you are not the winner. And this is also with the World Championship. Now, I had a problem with the 2022 World Championship because we had in the final a player who wins in rapid, who was never ahead in the classical, who didn't qualify from the candidates, and who didn't qualify to the candidates.
Yes.
We talk about something that is sort of ridiculous. And this really is the thing that made that match much less credible than the one we have now, even though he plays in this match based on this.
Right. But I'm glad to hear you say that, because with your emphasis on qualifying, I was like, what does Jakob think about Deng's path to the World Championship?
and it's even worse. It's even worse than that. So he gets into the candidates because Kayakin is disqualified. Now, Kayakin should have been disqualified from the 2021 World Cup, because during the rapid, according to the rules, of which only the FIDE president or the FIDE council can change, Kayakin left the playing area and sat with his second and prepared with a computer. You are not allowed to leave the playing area. You're not allowed to use electronic device. He was
within a tiebreak match.
Within a tiebreak match, and there's no dispute about this, because Nigel Short, a member of the appeals committee, saw him doing it. But Nigel Short here had failed his duties of actually reading the rules to the tournament he was in the appeals committee for. In my opinion, most people will approach this because these things are normally like political bones thrown out to people. It's not necessarily the best arbiter to get, but that they would read the rules once something come up. But in this case, if he had read it before, then he would know there's something wrong there. You can argue that he's not the arbiter. He should only step in the moment where he's actually being asked as a member of appeals committee. It's sort of, I'm not out for Nigel or anything like that at all, but it is not a disputed fact that Kayakin broke the rules. FIDE's argument is that the arbiter, I have this in writing, the arbiter at the second round playoffs said to the players they didn't have to obey by these rules. Neither Sam nor Kayakin were present, and allowed them to leave. There are other players who are talking with their seconds over the the sort of the little wire, so they are not leaving the area, but they're still clearly communicating with someone who is communicating with electronic devices. It's a normal FIDE mess. But anyway, there is Kayakin talked about how it was horrible that on the free day there was nowhere he could sit with his coach and prepare, so they had to go to the VIP room. It's like, it's not disputed. He didn't read the rules. He didn't intend to cheat, but he did cheat. And whether you intend to cheat or not, if you break the rules, you should be disqualified. Now, FIDE only were aware of this long after the finish of the tournament. We never argued that the tournament should be changed or anything. You could say Kayakin should be disqualified, and then a match between Fedoseev and Sam should be held to determine the last qualification spot to the candidates. I understand the argument, and I made this with Aagaard, that the tournament is over, and to sort of go and mess up with things long after the tournament is over, it's sort of a mess. But if you are in a situation where you disqualify Kayakin, there are players in front of Ding who has a right to be there. Like it literally has, he doesn't even qualify to the list of reserve.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an election year, and he's Chinese. So it's a mess.
Yeah.
Let me preempt some comments here, because whenever we bring up Carlsen's performance and how he's quitting classical chess, people are like, Carlsen has won every single tournament he played this year. Carlsen won 15 tournaments this year. Those are all speed chess events, and a lot of like some
and
online events.
Online events.
If you were trying to say
speed events, he didn't win any.
If you were trying to say who was like the number one blitz and rapid player, if you had a separate tour or ranking system for that, then maybe, right? He won the Champions Chess Tour. He got to the finals of the World Blitz Championship.
Online blitz and rapid player, I think we would just agree Carlsen is still...
Like he won everything.
It's like unquestionable. We're talking about classical chess.
He won the things he really participated in and really cared about.
Right. And that's what he spent his time. He spent his time playing those games. When we say he only played 18 games, he played, 100 of these rapid games in these online matches.
And I think they are fantastic tournaments. And I think from a sporting perspective, they're extremely fair. You can qualify your way into them. The way we have with the losers bracket is like, the whole thing is very well designed. And I think to a great extent it's designed by Carlsen himself. And it's not designed to give him any advantage, with the exception of that he enjoys the time control more. But I'm not sure it gives him an advantage over other time controls. So like that again, there's no dig on Carlsen, but classical chess is a very different game from speed chess. Playing online is a very different thing from playing over the board, whether Kramnik believes it or not. And yeah, it's he just hasn't played enough to qualify for it. Like if you have a tennis player who was number one last year, and he wins some sort of, like, let's say Rome Masters or something, and then he's knocked out in the semis in another tournament, and then he
skips the 4 Grand Slams.
On average, over the last 3 years, I've won more events. I'm number one. You'd be laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
It's if you don't play, you're not number one. And this is also why the match this time was felt so much better, because there was no doubt that Gukas deserved to be there.
Right.
And it was not just a fluke that, he qualified last minute to the candidates, and then he won the candidates without beating any of the other top guys, because he also won all these other things. And you can sort of, from Jess's perspective, feel good about it.
Yeah. Jesse, is Jakob making you feel better about Gukesh? Is he peeling some of your asterisks off of this match for you?
Well, like I said, I feel like Nepo Ding has a huge asterisk next to it for a variety of reasons. Definitely Ding's qualification. We can add to the fact that Carlsen's not there. And this one, Of course, it's a problem that Carlsen isn't there, but it's a faded asterisk. I like what you said, Dave. There's an expiration date. Carlsen, you hear that, buddy? There's an expiration date. And so every time, it's unsatisfying, but it's any kind of claim is fading.
Well, if that's 3 years, it's gone, yeah?
Yeah.
So, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, especially if he's like more interested in playing rapid chess and Fischer random than he is in playing classical, if that's kind of played out for him or just not his passion right now, fine, then let somebody else be the top player of that discipline.
I have actually a question to you guys here, because I haven't decided this with myself yet. It's clear we have seen from all the sort of leaked with these various from Nakamura, Giri, Carlsen, and so on, that it certainly is the intention to call this freestyle cycle here that they're coming with for the World Championship.
Right.
And from a sporting view of the players playing it, it does not feel entirely unfair. We have had candidates where, Wildcard went to number 4 player in the world in a tournament that was coincidentally sponsored by his father-in-law. But we have a situation here where, for me, I have a problem with it, which I'm not sure how to feel about, because we are missing some players from this cycle, which really have at least some sort of a claim to be there, and that's Wesley So, Sam Sevian, and Dominguez. Especially So's claim is very, very strong. So these players, Sevian and Dominguez have won the 9XL St. Louis, which has definitely been the strongest freestyle tournament outside of FIDE's Freestyle World Championship. And Wesley So was is it 22 or 21?
21, yeah. He won the FIDE
World Champion.
World Champion.
Which was a proper tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And in this tournament here, we have Anand, which I mistakenly on Twitter assumed, because I'm not very good at forms and reading regulations, that sort of requires me to take the day off to do it. I assumed he was there because he's number 10 in the world on rating based on 5 games, not even a tournament. But he's there as a wild card. But still, we have wild card given to a player because of his nationality and sort of his. Basically, it's sort of like the tournament is very much styled like Formula One. So it's like we have a Chinese and a Japanese driver in Formula One, so they can sell T-shirts basically. And
my question.
There, and we only had one guy who could actually qualify himself for this tournament. Can it, in its first year, be a world championship?
Maybe. I mean, okay, so I have a little context on this. I just did commentary on their qualifying events last week, in which Sevian, and Dominguez all participated. They were defeated. Fedoseev was the qualifier. It was a rapid time control instead of a classical time control, so it was not the most robust qualifying event, but they have a qualifying event. In general, for most of their events, they plan to have 2 qualifying spots, one through a series of specific qualifiers, and one where they'll invite the winner of a big event, such as, the winner of the World Championship match. Gukesh got his spot in this first one by winning the World Championship match. They were going to invite either him or Ding. And then other events along the way, I don't know exactly which ones are selected, right? But stuff like Wake on Zay or Super Bet or something like that. Mm-hmm. So there are some ways to qualify. Obviously, Wesley. Also, Nepo is somebody who's been in the Final Four when FIDE has run their World Championships of Fischer Random in 2021, 2022.
And he lost to Fedoseev also.
Also a big name. He lost to Fedoseev. So he's also somebody who you could consider would be there. To me, also a big absent name is Aragaisi. And it matters to me if he was invited and declined, because that's not his thing. And he's working on classical, or if he was like completely snubbed and not even invited to these qualifiers, that would be pretty bad to my mind, because he's, top 5 in the world, probably, we would assume.
Yeah, well, he's number 4 in rating and number 2 in the circuit, and it's top 5, however you do the system.
Yeah. So, but could it be a World Championships? I mean, my guess is it's going to be the best Fischer Random World Championship cycle that we will have in 2024. So it's its first time, and there will probably be things that the organizers would agree they should change for 2025 or 2026, right? They'll learn and make adjustments. But my guess is it'll be by far the best one we have this year, and so whoever wins it will be our Fischer Random World Champion for this year.
But this is a little bit the thing. It's like, yes, it's the best event, but do you have to meet a certain standard of it being
I agree.
a sport for it to be a world championship?
You have to have a minimum standard, or David's going to say that there was just no world champion that year. And I would say between the qualifying and between them having, 8 or so of the world's top 10 involved, that they're doing as well as basically anyone's ever done.
But this is sort of where, this is my asterisk to this here, which is they basically take the rating list from a different game and use this for qualifying. And this is really my asterisk. And then they put someone in there for his fan appeal, basically, to raise sponsorship. Now, I have no criticism at all for doing it. I have no problem with them calling it a world championship. But the question is whether or not we would consider it a world championship. And for me, the main problem is that we have a lot of players, which you mentioned. Yeah, they didn't make it through this quite short and quite different qualification, played online, which is, for me, is a huge asterisk.
Yeah.
It's a very different game. But Vinnick said if we had to play standing, probably would have a different world champion. So for me, that there's a lot of asterisks with it. Of course, there's also the whole legal discussion that anyone who will play in the FIDE World Championship cycle will at some point have signed very, like, a thing that nobody thought about actually mattered of, and I will not participate in any World Championship for a competing organization, where everyone thought that was probably a chess.com, became global championship or something like that at that point. And I think that's the main reason why chess.com had to change what they called it, sort of. And I think they did the provoking thing to create attention to what they were organizing as well. It was very well played. I enjoyed it immensely. But there's sort of a number of asterisks. But I think we are in the same way with the Steinitz, Morphy, declaring yourself, crowning yourself as emperor, like Napoleon kind of style territory, that if the subsequent events have a sporting integrity, then we sort of will be okay with it. But on the other hand, if it sort of happens in 2025 and it financially collapses in 2026,
no one will talk about it later.
And this becomes this weird thing where basically what I'm saying is sort of the opposite of what I was saying earlier.
Right.
And call me a hypocrite, because what I'm saying, like, you play sport, the World Championship, and then you're the world champion. But here it's like, but it's sort of a home cooked World Championship, and we have to see if it has legs before we accept it. And
also it's a great example.
It's just a mess again.
It's an example of why the fans matter, because I think the past freestyle championships didn't gain any traction because people didn't care. And this one as well, I guess we have a debate in the dojo. David's a huge fan of this freestyle thing. I don't think it's necessarily going to go anywhere. But if it did, then it could turn into an event. And then maybe in retrospect, we'd be like, this was the first freestyle, the first true freestyle championship, you know? But the fans need to be there in numbers, kind of like we had with the Gukesh Ding match, where it was just huge amounts of interest, you know? Will we have that? I doubt it, but it's possible. You know, that's what David wants.
I agree with the cautious optimism where it would be great if this is great. Like, I really would love this to be great. I want to love it. But I share Jess's fear that the fans might not love it when they find out that these guys don't even know how to put up the pieces. So
yeah,
it's I don't think it's enough to have a big prize fund, a big budget. We'll have to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think we're all in it. We'll have to see. But I have some real hopes.
It was my best line. Nobody liked it.
It was a pretty good line. It was a good line.
No, I got
it. You're given nothing here. Nothing. The top crowd.
I was just it's just the thought made me sad, because I was like, yeah, you know, the fans generally, they don't like 960. They mostly just don't get it. Not like they don't get it. It's just they're just barely having a grip on the regular chess. You know, now they got to look at 960. And
Carlsen put it correctly, that I think, again, this is another example of the guy being an absolute genuine human being. He said, you know, chess is great, except for at the very top level, where, you know, it's all the opening's been played, we know it all, and there is a certain fatigue that can happen. And but for every other level, chess is still great. I still love the idea of classical chess and so on. Just also, he has this problem that at the highest level, and we've seen this in the last two World Championship matches compared to the previous ones, you get much more of a lively interaction and much more of an interesting match if both players think they can win. Mm-hmm. Against Carlsen, you know, I know from a friend who was inside the team of Kayakin that in advance he thought it would be an absolute success if he made the playoff. You know, then he would already be a success, which doesn't make any sense, you know, like from a sporting perspective. Like, but he just didn't think he had a chance to win, and then he made the playoff, and he was sort of shocked that he made it, and also a little bit sad that they hadn't followed my advice, which was to prepare especially for the playoff as a separate event. But yeah.
Well, Magnus, if you play Gukesh, he's going to throw some weird curveballs at you, buddy. It's not going to be some theoretical battle. Come on now. Come back. All right.
Well, you know that Carlsen and Gukesh have played a match.
No.
2023 World Cup.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But of course, we have to remember Gukesh was underage at the time.
Right.
Also, that wasn't a match. That was 2 games.
Yeah,
it was 2 games. It was a match.
We don't call that a match in the dojo.
That's not a match like Alekhine Capablanca was a match.
You know, over in our academy, you know, we call that a long match. You know? No, by the way, you know, I've been arguing this on Twitter. Anyone can argue against me and do. The Carlsen hasn't won a classical tournament since January 2022, which was Weekend Say. Sort of the end of his great run, 21 run was winning there. And he's played some, you know, and you know, he did win the 23 World Cup. He did win Norway Chess in 24. Norway Chess there were blitz, and he tied in the classical part, except if you use the 3-point system, which they did. In which case he actually was a point ahead of Nakamura. They both made 6 out of 10. And he did win the World Cup. The average rating of his opponents in the World Cup was 26.65. It's not really a super tournament. And he did win some of them in a rapid, and it didn't look good on the way and so on. It's not a great argument for him being the #1 classical player. And I understand full well that's because he's not motivated. The reason why he didn't play well and didn't play tournaments was he wasn't interested. He lost the motivation. And a motivated Carlsen is like a resurrected Kasparov, like make Kasparov 30 years younger, let him play Carlsen. It's just as realistic as a highly motivated Carlsen in this period. He just wasn't. He wasn't there. Kasparov wasn't there. Fischer wasn't there. So I think that this spot as number one is up for the people who are playing. The freestyle thing, I'm concerned. Would love people would love chess to spread and be loved, even if the pieces are put up differently. Yeah, people
Okay.
This by now.
Well, let's finish it there. That was a great talk. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. I love the show.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.